So this slide is intended to dive deeper into kind of the solution stack and understanding what's happening within Gluware Control and why the orchestration engine is so powerful. So let's take a look at that. What does the orchestration engine deliver? Well, first and foremost, we are a data model driven platform. What that means is everything we ingest into the network, we wrap in data models. We then treat those data models programmatically. So we're essentially enabling programmatic control of even CLI-based networks. And we are able to do that through the vendor adapter layer. So the vendor adapter layer is where we teach or train our engine to understand the CLI and semantic of the underlying operating system. So once we're able to speak that language of Cisco's iOS or Juniper's Junos or Arista or Palo Alto Panos or F5 and on, we teach it how to speak, and then through package management, through the various packages we load, we continue to onboard the intelligence into our system, how to inventory those systems, how to perform operating system upgrades, and how to perform configuration management. So we'll talk about that, but one of the nice things to understand about Gluware is that we're a very modular system. Once the framework is in place, while you're running Gluware, even in between releases, we can add or enhance support for multi-vendors. So continuing the conversation here, it is key that we are data model driven. So therefore, those data models reside in the databases. And so we have the built-in data models. Databases. You don't have to learn database query languages. You don't have to learn SQL. We have the underlying relational and non-relational databases, and we have the engines that process the data. So these engines enable us to do things like discovery and do intent-based provisioning. Next is we have the integrated web server, and this provides services up to the application layer, which we're going to talk about in a second. We have the messaging bus, which allows communication with our platform, very deep level logging. This is one thing customers really love about Gluware, is the transparency and seeing exactly what Gluware is doing at the CLI or at the API level. We have robust authentication services with support for things like LDAP and Radius. We recently added support for things like SAML and OAuth and two-factor, and have very robust security and authentication into Gluware. Gluware has a powerful scheduling engine, so if you want to schedule audits, drifts, provisioning, reporting, all of it can be built in and then scheduled for periodic-based activity. From a communication and notification standpoint, we have an integrated email server that will allow you to email out reports and messages and other things that you're scheduling. We also have Syslog Integration, where Gluware can catch Syslog messages and associate those with things like configuration changes. Gluware is a multi-tenant architecture. We call tenants organizations, and it's a multi-user architecture with full role-based access control. So you are able to control your users and what they're able to do with Gluware as a platform, and you're able to define organizations so you can logically divide, let's say, your data center devices or your WAN devices or campus devices and so on and so forth. Other components of the orchestration engine, if you're using our OS manager for operating system upgrades, we have integrated file servers that can be distributed. So that's why you see kind of like multiple boxes there. You can distribute file servers out closer to devices for better performance. The way Gluware is highly scalable, as I was touching on the last slide, is that we have a multi-engine architecture. So your primary orchestration engine is going to have, by default, 2 engines running. Those engines are provisioning engines, I should say, that perform the jobs like discovery and audits and config modeling and others. You can also install and deploy zone engine servers. So this is where you're pushing out Gluware out, let's say, provisioning power of Gluware out closer, more distributed in your network for higher performance and higher scale. I was going to go a little bit further into what intent-based means. So with an intent-based provisioning architecture, with Gluware, you're defining an intended state, the policy or the network configuration that you want to be on the network. Gluware will read the current state. We ingest that into a data model. We then compare it to the desired state, and we'll we will render on the fly what is required to achieve that desired configuration. This includes removing statements that are out of policy. So we are able to recognize the things that shouldn't be there, things that are missing, or things that need to be corrected. We'll render the proper configuration and interact with the device to apply that configuration. And then there's a full verification. So this is where you have the verification cycle to ensure you're in that intended state. So let's move on a little bit here. At the application layer, Gluware resides at, really, it is a full browser-based app suite. And when you're operating, when you launch Gluware Control, you then navigate through the applications. So let's just run through them really quickly. Device Manager, where you're performing discovery and inventory. Drift and Audit, where you're doing monitoring and assessment and auditing. Your data insights are provided by the dashboard framework and the new Data Explorer application introduced in Gluware 4.1. You have OS Manager to automate operating system upgrades and config modeling to automate configuration changes and workflows for process automation. And then we have the Glue API, which is our published REST API. When you want to integrate or work with Gluware programmatically, you'd consume or work through our REST calls into the platform. So let's build this out and just tie in the last piece of it. You bring in your config policy. Gluware does not restrict you what you want to automate. Gluware enables you to automate anything the vendor supports in its operating system and its configuration capabilities. So you bring that, what you want to automate, into the Gluware platform. You also can define your own audits along with using standard audits, and you bring your own processes and you automate those with Gluware. On the bottom side of the network, this is where I talked about it already. With our 30+ vendor adapters, we automate traditional networks, API endpoints, and public. Hopefully that gave you a good sense of kind of the solution stack. The way it's implemented is slightly different in our AWS version, where it's more cloud native, or the version packaged in virtual machines that are installed on-prem. But we can get into that as you are making your decision which platform you're going for in your Gluware deployment.